Okay, I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, February 4th, 2015 Plan Commission meeting. We'll have a Board of Adjustment meeting following the Plan Commission meeting. First item on the agenda is to call to order. Roll call.
Stonebarger,
Present.
Arnold,
Here.
Shriver,
Here.
Lawrence. Here. Dolly,
Here.
McGuire.
Here.
Johnson is absent. We have a quorum.
First item is the approval of the agenda. I need a motion and a second.
I move.
Motion
Second.
by Mr. Arnold, second by Mr. Stonebarger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Second item on the agenda is a Sherwin-Williams edition. It's a preliminary plan. We'll have a resolution action 2015-2 to approve their preliminary plan. Sarah?
Yes, I would like to just give a brief introduction to what's going on here, and then you can open the public hearing and let Jeff do some further explanation. But we're actually really excited to have a potential development occurring here on the extension of 26th Street in Watertown, which is across from Culver's. And the developer's in kind of a hurry, and this property hasn't been platted yet and needs to make some decisions about how the development goes forward. So we're trying to facilitate a quick turnaround on the review by doing a couple of things. The road right-of-way for 26th Street was included in the previously approved preliminary plan for East Park, but this land wasn't included, and whether or not to ask for a preliminary plan just for basically a lot was a decision the city made just because this area is somewhat controversial and we get lots of concerns from neighbors about what's going on. And so we decided to just follow through of our process and do a preliminary plan, which includes a public hearing, so that the neighbors can participate in that public process. And we have a record of it. So that's what we're doing here today. And so I'll just let, if you want to open the public hearing, then have Jeff start.
With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone has anything for or against the approval of a preliminary plan.
Yeah, I'll just give quick history. We know that this property was recently annexed and zoned. That went through you guys and the city council. And now the petitioner is requesting a preliminary plan approval. And with all preliminary plans, we have a design review team meeting. And I would like to read the comments that the design review team had. These comments were in your packet. Number one, fire hydrant deficiency. There are no hydrants north of 212 and none within 250 feet. This must be addressed. And the municipal utilities has no future plans for a water main in 26th Street East. The approved preliminary plan for East Acres Developments shows that a main went through 8th Avenue South, and that's this road, or potentially this road right here, but not in 26th. Number two.
No, let's wait a sec here.
Okay.
I want to just give you a little bit of further information about the hydrant. There will be a hydrant on the south side of the highway. Municipal utilities will be installing a hydrant next to the Culver's property in this vicinity. But to get a fire hydrant on the north side of Highway 212 would require boring underneath the highway, which costs $150 to $180 a foot. This property abuts a water main already. There's a water main in Highway 212, so municipal utilities doesn't feel the need to extend a main to serve it. However, if they need a hydrant to meet their fire protection needs, they could put one in at their own expense, but that's would involve boring across the highway and installing it.
Where's the nearest one on the south side?
Right now, I think there's one on this side of the intersection, and municipal utilities will be putting one
Then
on the other side.
Where's the closest one on the north side of the
There
highway?
are no hydrants on the north side. So if there were only hydrants on the south side to serve this property, you'd have to shut the highway down to lay the hose across to
Okay,
fight a fire there.
so if we move west on, I know there's some development there, there's no hydrants over there
Oh, there
as
will
well?
be west, yes, west at 23rd Street, but, you want to show that? It's
Eventually,
not within 250 feet.
eventually, where is the fire hydrant? Where is the water main is projected to go through 8th Avenue from 29th Street to 8th Avenue?
Right. Move it back.
And that's in the preliminary plan of the Coho property.
Right, there would be, hydrants are usually put at intersections.
Say that again.
Hydrants are normally located at intersections.
So the
and
intent is to
the-
have a hydrant on the north side. They just
Over-
don't have one yet.
There's no water main in 8th
Yet.
yet. Right,
So on the west side of that property, there's a hydrant somewhere between the river and that property?
yes.
Whereabouts would that be?
Okay. Like, in there? Is there one at 212? So like 2 hydrants in there now? 2 hydrants in there now, one at the corner of 212 and one along the curve.
And the intention isn't to connect those to the, over to 8th.
Eventually, yes, but that,
But so you're saying for the time being, if we approve this preliminary plan and a building went there for the time being, there wouldn't be a fire hydrant other than across the street?
unless the
Owner chooses to put their own in.
puts their own in.
What's our city standards and our codes say in regard to fire hydrants near commercial
I'll
buildings?
let Chip answer that.
Chip, Watertown Fire Prevention Officer. Usually the hydrants are, we want them, the standard is, the fire code is 250 feet from the structure. And that's why a lot of hydrants are 500 feet apart to, because they cover the 250 feet gap in between, so.
Does the hydrant on the south side of the highway, is that within 250
It's
feet?
about 366
So that's
feet.
that's outside our code, and there's nothing east of it within thousands of feet. How far are we from the west to the nearest fire hydrant?
And the way the fire hydrants are laid out too, it's, they're on the fire department access road or a
South.
street. So unfortunately, that would not cover, as far as a bird flies, it might cover it, but not a fire truck. So for the feet.
How far was that, Jeff?
And I don't know exactly where the fire hydrant is, but it's about 1,000 feet to the middle of the property.
So it's quite a distance nonetheless.
Would the utility company have a problem if they did pay for it themselves? Would that be doable?
Mark Meyer, Watertown Utilities. Yeah, that'd be fine. It'd be considered a private fire line, though.
So where are they running the water to the building from then?
They would have to bore the highway to get to our main in the south right away.
So they're gonna bore to the highway to get to their main for their own water service.
Right.
But
they're-
that main what they're boring isn't big enough to feed a fire hydrant.
Right. In order to put a fire line in, they're gonna probably have to put a casing in. And a 12-inch would cost $120 a foot, and 12-inch might not be big enough to get through there with the size of rock. So,
Would this be what the developer would want to do since they're on a time constraint?
well, to me, it just depends on if they need the added fire protection. I mean, the service, that's what they would have to do, is go across the road anyway.
Okay.
So, yeah, our whole water plan didn't include crossing at 26th Street, so.
And if there's a plan for a hydrants to be put in, the fire department will be happy. We'll work with what they have going on.
So
here.
they get laid out right with the other ones that they're going to put in on the north side?
Right, it's,
You know,
it's,
some kind of a,
it's a great expense to have to put a one hydrant in for one building. And we can, there's areas where we know that hydrants are coming in and going in, so, we're not gonna be opposed to development. It's just, things to think of. If 8th never shows up, then, the fire department does have an issue with this, but if 8th does is gonna happen, which we see for, you know, it's a great place to have, you know, a business put in, we can, you know, there's a time where we're okay with it, so. I just have to let you know is what the code are, is, you know, it's 250 feet and such like that, so.
Question for Sarah and Jeff. We have a preliminary plan, an outdated preliminary plan for 8th Avenue. In that preliminary plan, if in fact it got to the master planning stage, that main would be put in 8th Avenue, correct? The water main, which would feed
Right.
the fire hydrants for that area,
Right.
correct? At whose expense is that main put in?
Municipal utilities usually puts that in with the street construction.
Before the street goes down, they'll put,
Right.
the
Right.
municipal utilities will put that main all the way through there.
Right.
It's not the developer that pays for that.
No, well, and they recoup their costs with connection fees.
Correction. Okay, thank you.
When you said that the municipal utilities had no plan on putting a water main in there, what is the plan for the municipal utilities and the water mains in that area? And what time frame are you talking about?
Well, and maybe as long as you, what about sewer? Maybe address that end of it too. Where are we picking that up at?
Sewer is a different story. Let Mark talk about water. I'll talk about sewer.
Mark Meyer again. Our plan is to run 8th Avenue over to that 23rd Street whenever it becomes platted.
Okay, you've got water to the west of there. Are you
Yep.
gonna tie that together at that time?
Yeah,
or
we'd,
what?
we'd tie it, we'd go from, well, it'd be whenever Morris's plat their land, we'd have to have access across their land to tie to the west.
And what you're getting at there, Mark, is you have plans on doing it. It just
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
planned on being done in the near future. The reason being because the land hasn't been platted yet, and the
Right.
right-of-ways haven't been dedicated.
If the right-of-way was platted, we'd be putting them.
Tell us about the process of that. Let's say the right-of-way got platted and it included 8th Avenue. In general, and this is more for our own information on all developments, once that right-of-way is platted, do you guys immediately go in and put it in, or do you kind of wait till there's development happening?
Well, we usually put it in. If the road's platted, if it's a platted street, we put it in.
That's what triggers it to be put on your
Yeah.
radar.
And then in a commercial setting, we charge per square foot for a hookup fee, tapping fee.
And so back to Sarah, where we have here is we've got a lot in the middle of two areas where we don't have platted right-of-way on either side, so you can't run your water there.
Right.
So this might be a question that you guys can answer fairly quickly, but what if let's say they don't put a right-of-way through there, they put a big box store on that land, and there is 8th Avenue doesn't go through their property? Is that a possibility?
That's a possibility. We don't know. We haven't gotten a preliminary plan yet approved for that property that's between 23rd and 26th. But we do think there will be connectivity somehow. We don't know where, but somehow the water main will be eventually connected.
We require the box store to put in the mains and the hydrants and stuff. It was, they bought the whole property.
Right.
Okay.
And that property would be up against Willow Drive, or, you know, it'd be up to where our water main's already in.
So eventually that lot will be serviced from city water, conventional city water, from one direction or the other. We just don't know what, because we haven't got a plat.
Correct.
And it hasn't gone through the platting process. We don't have the right-of-way guarantee isn't there, and you're not willing to make an investment there until you get that.
Yeah. You know, we'd be spending $50,000 to maybe run a water main across the road to maybe something that would be the only lot that would possibly develop.
So do you have plans for the development on the west and the development north, so we can see an overview on how these plans kind of tie together, or if they don't tie
We
together? or-
don't. We've never gotten beyond a concept plan stage for the property to the west. I mean, we can show you a concept plan that we've received. We've got one loaded, but it doesn't connect anything and it's not useful.
How's the concept plan north of there?
We don't have anything approved yet.
Well, okay, you're building, you're building a road that goes into, whatever, the First Avenue extension,
Right.
and has that been platted, that area?
No.
Or you got a, you
nothing-
don't have a preliminary plan there, but you're building a road, or?
I think what he's talking
We have
about
a
is
few.
further north up there where
Yeah.
that pond is.
Yeah, where the pond is and up in that area.
What you see
Okay.
in green is what we have for approved preliminary plans. Now, this area's been platted,
Okay,
but there's
Yeah.
nothing approved in here.
okay, I was referring to the part up there in the northwest corner that has been.
Over here,
Yeah.
on the
How-
other side of Willow Creek, yes, that's platted.
Now, is there any plans for, it looks like there's a road coming across the
No, there
Willow Creek
won't,
there?
there
What-
are no plans for a road crossing Willow Creek. There's Willow Creek Drive and Highway 212.
Okay, so if we come in with 8th Avenue there, is that gonna tie in with, we don't know?
We don't
West
know
of there?
how, but we expect it to tie in with the extension of 23rd. That, normally the developers drive that with, and I know they're interested in development out here. We basically have 3 property owners in this vicinity. They're all working with Austin Engineering, and maybe Rod should come up and talk about what he knows, because I haven't seen anything that has
Well,
been presented for
I'm
this
not
area.
really comfortable with this postage stamp planning thing where nothing matches up.
I agree.
So Rod, the $1 million question from us to you is gonna be, we have concept plans, we have an outdated preliminary plan. Now we've asked the current thing we're on right now is, can you do a preliminary plan on one lot, which is kind of odd. What we really need is a master plan, and we've done this. This is probably the 3rd or 4th time in 6 months with different projects throughout the city. We said, wow, it'd really make it a lot easier if we had a master plan. But what we're asking is 3 different owners with 3 different properties who none of know which really 100% what's going to happen with their property or how it's going to develop, to tell us how it's going to develop.
Well, right now, you got this concept plan that was initially approved back in 2011, and you know that's expired. But we have instructions to work on 8th Street, or 8th Avenue there right now. We're preparing that right now to present to, hopefully by your next meeting here in next month. Then Morris has owned this property here, the Morris family. There's three or four family members that own it. And one of the things that's going to be taken account in that plan is extending 26, put a little curve in here so that isn't a straight shot through, and then connect up with Willow Creek Drive. Now, Morris has indicated they like that, but they really haven't seen that plan yet or approved it, but that's on the drawing board right now. So that would probably be one of the things that would be brought up through your concept plan process. Now, as far as the connection here between these two, whether it be here or up here, it could be anywhere in this corridor, but yet we got to have enough room in there so that it'll be a developable lot. Because we got the same situation we got here. We got an undersized lot. It'd been nice if that lot was just a hair bit bigger, so we wouldn't have to be asking for a variance on it, but that's what it is. So, but right now, Morris's haven't said what they'd like to see coming through here, because there's been 2 or 3 different concepts on that. This approach here is the one that has been, the DOT has disallowed, and it has to be taken out, so. And that has gone to the Supreme Court, and they've ruled against the Morris family on that, so. So your access points will be here on 23rd, 26th, and 29th. And you'll notice in your packet there too is that one of the things that we're gonna have to do is do a traffic impact study of that area to see what's gonna happen here. But I think that impact is probably gonna be not much different than it is today. You're gonna see some increase, but I think what you're gonna see, the major increase is up here on Willow Creek Drive. Because the traffic counts on Willow Creek Drive, I checked on that yesterday, is higher than up in this area than it is down here in this area on 212. You know, by 1,200 vehicles a day. So it's substantial, so,
So Willow Creek Drive, that's limited access too, right?
pardon?
Willow Creek Drive is a limited access road also, right?
Yes.
Just up
And-
here, yes, it is, one every 400 feet.
So
It is.
when all this is said and done, how many accesses do you envision going on to Willow Creek Drive?
Right now, we're only looking at one, coming in on Willow Creek Drive from the south here.
Okay, if you go farther west, there's an access going up from the south, and then you go block and a half farther east, there's one coming in from the north. Are we gonna run into the same thing we did on 19th Street, where we have an access every half a block? We don't have anything that matches up? I mean, eventually, you're gonna have roads going north off Willow Creek Drive too. Is there any continuity there?
Right in this area, we probably won't have much for approaches that going north, because it'll be just businesses' approaches there that would be coming across there, is what it boils down to. But further to the
So
west.
on the north side, if you have a business approach, or you can put frontage roads up there and have, you probably will end up with an intersection there someplace. And I don't know if you're gonna put a traffic light on there or not. It would be nice if you have an intersection, one intersection, rather than have to worry about traffic coming in from the south, driving a little farther, having traffic coming in from the north on a 45-mile-an-hour road.
You must be talking further to the west, John.
On Willow Creek Drive, if you're coming in from the south, you said there's gonna be one, or 26th Street, you're gonna extend up there, that'll be coming in from the south. Now, if you develop on the north side of Willow Creek Drive, if you develop up here on the north side, where's that, I assume you're gonna probably end up with some kind of a frontage road up here to serve those businesses, and where are you going to, come in and tie it into Willow Creek Drive at? Is there any kind of continuity so that these roads are gonna match up, or are they gonna be hopscotch like we've been doing lately?
Yeah. Well, Strumpus Drive that's on the north side there is gonna be offset, and we're gonna be quite a ways away from that avenue to the south there. That's Strumpus development up there.
A lot of this is floodplain in here. We're not expecting roads crossing Willow Creek. It's got a floodway.
Right now, you've got a road coming in here, and then this one comes in over here, so they're staggered.
Right.
Frontage road up here that would tie in would make it a lot.
We don't expect roads back in the pond area at all. There probably won't be roads.
You'll have development all along here, though.
These,
And these lots
if
of
these
like-
are developed here, this is mostly floodplain. This one's gonna be a challenge to develop. I think it could be, but it probably have a shared driveway, and the access points are limited by the overlay district. We won't be having accesses any closer than 400 feet, whether it's a driveway or a road. And either way, 400 feet will eliminate any concern about traffic movement conflicts.
Well, just, we're too far north for this discussion that we're in here, but down in this circle or loop or whatever you want to call it, with the 3 different property owners, it'd make it a lot easier on our side of the fence if they get together and give us a master plan so we could kind of plan this so it doesn't look like it was done in the dark, because right
So-
now
I
that's
think
what
the
we're doing.
property owners would like that too, and you've been talking.
So when you first came up, I said, what are the chances of getting 3 owners out there to sit down together and put together a master plan? Who's gonna pay for it? Who's gonna organize it? And wouldn't it be nice if we knew exactly where all the roads were, the lot sizes, and as soon as it's platted, municipal utilities could start digging, and then it would develop? Can it be done?
Probably not my lifetime, but.
That's the response I've got from everyone I've asked that
Yeah.
question to. So here we come
comment-
back full circle, and we have
Right.
postage stamps all over.
The comment was made, and Pat, I don't know if you made it or, yeah, I think you made the statement. Have you been working with all 3 property owners?
Yes, I have.
But
and
but
I've been-
individually?
Individually, and I've been trying to get some continuity with it, but if you knew the history between a couple of the owners there, that you would understand what's going on there. I mean, I'm doing my best to get them together, to talk to one another, but it's a challenge.
So then we get.
It's hard for us, you know,
I know, I understand it's very hard.
we have
for
no
your
master
people.
plan of how anything ties together, but yet we want to go out in the middle of it and we want to sell off one parcel of ground.
It's very hard for us to go and say, let's do this, because we've got many examples west on Highway 212 where we, in hindsight, we said, well, that was developed incorrectly. 19th Street's intersection, the intersection by Dakota Bank, and the list goes on down there. And we've got a gateway overlay protection area that this falls into, that we put, that all the owners, when it was zoned that way, had agreed to a more stringent regulation to protect their own investments, most importantly. And man, right away, the first one comes out, you know, and I look and go, a person owns one piece of property, or he wants to do something with it, we should take a look at it and see what we can do. But the danger of it is, what if 8th Avenue is never platted there? How would it affect this property? Maybe it wouldn't affect it at all, but, you know, when we look at the overview of it, I can see where 26th is gonna go somewhere sometime. I'd agree to that. The downside of it is, if they show us that the 26th goes all the way over to Willow Creek, I think that's First Avenue Extension, I call it, now we're gonna have some concerns on the size of that road, and it's gonna carry a pretty heavy load. It's gonna be, could be a shortcut all the way across the thing, but it, so anyway, let's keep moving on. I think we're familiar with the fire hydrant part of it. What was number 2, Sarah?
The number 2 is the turnaround for vehicles somewhere. It doesn't matter where. It could be on this property possibly, or it could be on a property to the north, but you get a large vehicle in there, it needs to turn around.
And we've done that in the past, where we've had things that are partially developed and they put a cul-de-sac, and there's regulation in regards to how heavy it has to be and how wide. And you and your client are familiar with that, Rod?
Yeah,
No issues with that?
I don't feel that there's an issue there, and it'd be easy to put a little temporary turnaround at the end of this street.
Until 8th Avenue
Yeah.
is developed, north
well
or
as-
east or west, whatever direction it
That's
goes.
right. And as well as provide a little access for that building, which that occupant's gonna be out of there pretty soon anyway, so.
Okay, number 3.
The road section on the approved preliminary plan is 3 11-foot lanes, or 33 feet wide, and what we're proposing, or what we've seen on the plans for 26th Street, is narrower lanes. And I want to first make it clear that the preliminary plan for this site does not include 26th Street. That was included on the preliminary plan for East Park. So the preliminary plan for this property really doesn't have a road, although they need a road for access to their site. So they are entangled with each other.
So are you comfortable, Rod, with the road that was established on the Coho preliminary plan?
Yes, I'm comfortable with that. 'cause we got-
And, because that's what the assumption you made when you developed this piece of property,
But
was we're gonna use the Coho
plans
road.
don't show that section crossing the culvert. The plans show 10.5-foot lanes. And in discussions with the Department of Transportation, they haven't issued an access permit yet, or a change of access permit. That's farther down in here, but it is germane to this item, because semis have to come off of Highway 212 and turn in a 10.5-foot lane and cross that culvert. And they are wondering if, they don't think that the culvert is wide enough, but they aren't probably going to require that culvert be widened, because
They being the DOT.
they being the DOT. The DOT owns that culvert now. It's a driveway that serves a contractor shop. The application is to change the use of that access from a driveway into a public street. Then it'll be a city public street. It will be the city's narrow culvert.
Who submitted the application to the DOT?
I'll be completing the application to the
Okay.
DOT. and
It's the
filing-
property owner.
Yeah, it'll be on behalf of the property owner, and it'll be filed as a change of use for that. And I've also talked to Matt Bry and discussed this thing here too.
And that's a deal breaker. If the DOT says, no, we're not gonna make that, then it's a deal breaker, and we don't have, none of us, our hands are all tied.
And,
Correct.
and I talked to Matt Bry after I got this letter and stuff, visited with him about that. And these are 11-foot lanes that we're gonna be using on this. We're gonna widen that about 6 inches, so we would have 11-foot lanes.
You're gonna widen it crossing
Just
culvert?
6 inches is all.
Across the culvert, so,
Across the
so
culvert,
your
so we-
intention is to have 11-foot lanes
That's
crossing the
right.
culvert.
11-foot through lanes, 11-foot turn lane, and 11-foot right-hand turn lane. And by our preliminary truck turning movements templates that we put on there, the trucks can make the radius and down the 11-foot lane without any problem with that, so. And we'll do a traffic impact study with that too and run that by the DOT. We'll also have to file a permit for utility to occupy the right-of-way with the DOT as well as to work along that. So in visiting with Matt Bry, he didn't really have a problem with that. We also have, he was asking the distance from the back of the curb to the, what they call the clear zone obstacle, which would be the opening of the box, not the backside of the parapet. So we got about 2.5 feet in there to make that in there behind the curb. So the barrier of the curb is gonna go across that box. So we're gonna kind of channelize it that way.
So how wide is that culvert now?
How wide as it is? It's about 42, 43 feet. I don't remember right off the top of my head, but it's wide enough to get our road section in there.
If in fact a culvert had to be replaced, who participates in that? Who owns the, you said the DOT owns that culvert.
They won't participate in that.
They don't participate, so that's leaving us or you. And I'm seeing,
city, I
I'm
think.
seeing the city would,
Well, it would depend on when it was done. The council has approved a participation on the cost within the state right-of-way up to a maximum amount. And if the cost of the culvert exceeded the maximum amount, then it would be the adjacent property owners that would pay for the excess. But the culvert is within the state right-of-way, so if it cost less, which is unlikely, what do you think it would cost? Do you have an estimate? I think the maximum was 10 or 20,000 that the council was willing to put toward this,
it'd probably cost
and I think the culvert.
hundreds
would
of
be-
thousands to put
Well,
one in.
probably not
Couple hundred?
hundreds. Maybe 60,000, or, I mean, you're not doing the whole culvert, you're just widening it. The other one was 180 or so.
But
right?
so on this point with the design review team, the design review team would like 11-foot roads, and you feel that that culvert can be modified to suffice that at this point.
Well, right now, we can get that across there. The only thing is that, you know, that opening would be close to the back of the curb. And, there's different things a person can do with that if it come right down to it by putting some precast panels on top of that to make feel comfortable by crossing that. So I've seen that done in the county.
And we can move forward with that as we continue on with the plan. So let's, we might still visit
One
this
other point,
later.
there's no problem with load limit on that culvert?
No, it's handled a standard truck of HS20 loading.
So
it'll
we may
handle
come
that.
back to that. Let's go on to number 4, minimum 11-foot road lanes. We talked about that on number 3. Number 5, sidewalks aren't possible on that culvert. There would have to be some, if we were gonna make, and when I was out there, I looked, you got sidewalks on the south side of the road, you'd like everything to match up. We would possibly have to put some sort of a footbridge of some sort.
You'd have to use some sort of a footbridge to get across that box.
Who's we on that one? City or you?
Well, again, the city council has authorized participation in the cost up to a maximum. Anything over that is the property owner.
Okay, so, and property owners understand that, so let's keep moving. Number 6, sidewalks, they're expected to be on both sides of that road.
The site plan didn't show the sidewalks, but I don't think that's gonna be an
And
issue.
I think they understand, we'll put those
They've already
there.
been modified to show it.
Thank you. 7, floodplain, I assume that takes care of itself. Part of that property may be in the floodplain, but the structure's not. I assume the owners,
I disagree with that.
you don't think it's in the floodplain?
It's not in the
Okay,
floodplain.
in
because
either way, that's really not so much of us. We don't want stuff to be built in the floodplain or the floodway for that matter. But as far as financing and things of that sort, that seems to that gets in the way of that before we get in the way of it.
This is a FEMA designated A zone,
Yeah.
which is partially on the property. But the building is here. The subdivision ordinance requires this to be addressed, whether there's a building in it or not. This is an A zone which has no elevations determined, and the elevations need to be determined by engineering analysis.
We have done analysis of that channel and stuff there, and the analysis showed that the floodplain, base flood is 2 feet above the channel from the end of the box to the west side of the property.
So
And we
that's,
walked the outside of their property, and what would have to be done is file a letter of a map amendment called LOMA, which has been done routinely around the city, so that would have to be done.
so you're comfortable with the procedures of
Right.
doing that,
We've
and
done that all over the place here within the
yeah.
city.
In my business, I'm familiar with that too, and there's functions and vehicles for that, and if you can't get it, then it's, again,
Right. You don't
it's a,
apply
it's,
that.
they have bigger problems than that. Number 8, DRT, streets within the district should have a minimum 66 feet of right-of-way. The preliminary plan we're looking at are 60, I thought I saw in there, is that correct?
The preliminary plan does show 60, and there's a conflict with the landscaping ordinance that we have. Not to be confused with the overlay district, which also has landscaping requirements. The landscaping requirements for the overlay district apply to the frontage on Highway 212. But the frontage on 26th Street is covered by the city's landscape ordinance, which requires 15 feet of greenway between the back of the curb and the property line. And that can't be, it's physically impossible to meet that in the proposed road section of 3 11-foot lanes with curb and gutter and sidewalk. I think it leaves 5.8 feet for a tree planting area and needs to be at least 8. So it's not a huge change, but the minimum width for this size road for right-of-way to include the landscaping all within the right-of-way, where it's supposed to be, would be like 67 feet of right-of-way. You could, as an alternative from requiring a wider right-of-way, require property owners to dedicate an easement so that the sidewalk would go on their property, leaving enough greenway for a tree to be planted. But it doesn't physically fit. Those two things conflict.
So crossing that one, to me, this is kind of a sensitive area because we are in the Gateway Overlay Protection District where we said as you come into town, we want it to look a certain way. When it comes to this one, we're about 3 feet short from the back of the curb to the property line to put our sidewalk and trees and everything in. So that would require
4.2 feet.
4.2 feet. So what we want it to do, when we drive down the road, most people can't see the property lines and the right-of-ways. We see what it looks like aesthetically. So my question to you, Rod, is if we approve something that's 4.2 feet short of what we generally want, will you be able to plant those trees and grant an easement to put the sidewalk on your property instead of the right-of-way? So as a person looks driving by, we can't tell the difference that there wasn't enough right-of-way there.
I need to step in here just a little bit for a second. This street is not, it's in the gateway, but it's not on the thing, so the required green space for a tree on this is only 6 feet. If it's adjacent to Willow Creek or 212, it's 8 feet. So there's a.
It's the 15-foot greenway.
But the 15-foot
is
greenway
still-
is from the back of the curb of the street to the back of the curb of their property, not to the property line. They are short. They currently have, and if we get to that point, we'll go through the variance process.
It's got 13.33 feet, so it's short by 1.67.
So the question to you is, we can aesthetically make it look like we can't see that there's a shortage, a shortcoming there whatsoever. I mean, we can, by moving where the sidewalk goes and where the trees go, they might be on your property instead of the right-of-way, but a normal person's not gonna notice
No,
that.
not 1 foot.
Okay.
That's as proposed, unless you decide the road's gotta be wider or something, then it changes the parameters again, so.
So that's the
Let me
landscaping
ask
part
a
of it. What about the
question. I just wanna-
66?
Somebody threw out 4 point some feet. You just Ken brought up a question, and you had the answer in your mind already. You said it's 1 foot?
1.67 feet. But the thing is, that's what the variance is that you're gonna do with the Board of Adjustment.
That includes, but part of it being on the private property.
Correct.
Of the greenway.
Correct, which
But
the
I'm
ordinance
saying
allows.
to include it all in the
I-
public.
Is that the difference
right-of-way.
between the 66 and the 60-foot right-of-way?
It's that green
4.2
space
and-
requirement for, they need requiring 15 feet for the Gateway District, and we only have, what is it?
15 feet is for the landscape ordinance,
Landscape.
not for the overlay district, I believe.
Right, that 15-foot is an overall landscape ordinance, and whenever you get off of Willow Creek Drive or off 212, it reverts back just to the standard landscape ordinance.
And we have 13.33.
I'm trying to,
10,
That's what it says in your
10.
letter there.
yeah, whatever that says, that's what it is.
is not all within the right-of-way, though. And the point here is that if you want it in the right-of-way, you know, our ordinance says it can come off private property, which this developer is doing. But for the rest of it, how do you want to move forward is something maybe you can address later.
Number 9 was a drainage utility plan. That 60, or let me go back 1 second. The 66-foot right-of-way versus 60-foot, which was on the old preliminary plan. Whether we go 60 or 66, we're going to have the same size 11-foot lanes in those roads. So we're not, by approving a preliminary plan with less right-of-way, we're not allowing for a smaller road to be put in there.
And we still have the
That's my primary
sidewalks on
concern.
both sides? And we will still have sidewalks on both sides of that road, on the 60-foot?
If we did a 60-foot right-of-way on that section that we're looking at, that little section, and then you did continue 26th up to Willow Creek, I mean, could you have a 60-foot right-of-way here and then 66-foot on the rest of it going up?
You could.
And the thing is, we want to make sure aesthetically they look the same. That's why I asked if, the way the tree plantings and the sidewalks are placed, we should be able to look on Highway 212 and look north and not see a neck-down area. That's my primary concern aesthetically. Number 9 was a drainage utility plan. Pond to the north.
Right, and that's just a matter of adjusting their elevations on their pavement. One thing I might point out, though, this land currently undeveloped drains toward Highway 212, and according to the drainage plan, most of it still will drain to Highway 212, but the back part of it will drain to the west, and the north part of it will drain to the north. So there's little bits of it that are diverted a little bit, and it's maybe inconsequential, but
We're gonna capture that within the.
But
parking lot area.
you know, I would say it could be inconsequential, but not to the adjacent landowner. It's probably not in. So Rod, you were saying to address the fact that, you know, if I own some property and somebody builds next to me, I surely don't want to carry their water.
No, we certainly don't wanna put the water on the adjacent landowner. I mean, that's the whole thing, because we're gonna
Your intention is not to do that.
not to do that.
Okay, that's what we want to hear from you. The plan, number 11, the plan showed existing building on the property to the east are proposed to have access
They'll have access on the north end of the street there when we get done,
up there.
yeah.
Okay.
And the occupant of that building is gonna be moving.
And number 12, we talked about the DOT as far as the permitting process through the DOT, correct? What did I skip?
You missed 10, that's DOT too.
That was the drainage utility plan? Oh, silt fence, you guys don't have a problem with.
Matt probably didn't
Yeah.
indicate any problem
Yeah.
with that initially, so.
And
Just
then
gotta get a written notification on that.
state DOT number 13,
Same thing with 13.
same, and you work with the DOT regularly and understand how that.
We're buddies.
14, preliminary plan for East Park 26th Street was approved in February. That's something that's probably more of us, is that, tell me a little bit, Sarah, Coho came in, gave us a preliminary plan in 2011. From the city planning, from our guides, we say you have a preliminary plan and you have 3 years to go to master planning?
no. Preliminary plan and master plan are the same thing. We go concept plan, preliminary plan, plat.
And what
And
happened is it didn't
People
get
use the
platted.
term master plan.
But they didn't plat it because they didn't know what was gonna happen. And under the economic conditions since 2008 moving forward, I can understand why somebody says, I don't wanna put it in stone in case I get a better offer on a bigger lot. Historically, I mean, we could scrap the whole thing and just say, you know what, Coho, come back with another master plan, but we try to work with people and not necessarily do that, correct?
Yes, and I've spoken with the Coho folks that are here.
The thing that scares me is what if they said, we gave you a preliminary plan in 2011, we put 8th Avenue there, but now we've changed our mind and we've gone on with our development, assuming they were okay with it. What are they telling you with 8th Avenue? Are they still okay with 8th Avenue there?
They actually are interested in revisiting it and ironing out a few things. And are you interested in talking about it, or hear it right from them?
I'm Dave Cook. I'm one of the representatives from Coho. And as Sarah had discussed, we are interested in revisiting what we had, or I guess my father and John Holman had presented in 2011.
I'll ask you a hard question. How close are you to platting this so Mark can put the water in?
That I can't answer yet.
That's what you said last time. Not helping us any.
But we are interested in revisiting it, and we did have a discussion the other day about it.
But at this point, you still like that original plan of where 8th Avenue is. And I think
Seems to be a workable concept
can you
for us.
push that closer to 29th? Correct me if I'm wrong, but 8th Avenue is has to be there because where it connects into 29th. We can't, when I first looked at that, I said, and this is off the subject of what's in front of us, is how come that frontage road basically that's servicing those lots on 212 are accessing them from the back? And part of the answer is we really can't put a frontage road off 29th to connect in front like it does in front of Buffalo Wild Wings and the other side of the road. Is that correct, Sarah?
Yes.
So this is really their only option to access those is from the back.
Right.
So we could possibly be rest assured that 8th Avenue will come in, will connect on 29th there, and hopefully it'll connect on 26 somewhere near where it's showing there. My guess is, who owns that building that's there where Dallas Hanson Construction is? So you own it. So you could actually push that road back another few hundred feet, 8th Avenue, if you wanted deeper lots in 5 and 6.
If we had decided
Yeah.
to,
But that really doesn't have an effect on this piece of property, which is on the east side of 26th.
Right. Our biggest concern would be the width of the stub street coming in off 26. That would be adequate in width to handle the potential traffic that might flow through there. And we did measure the box culvert. It measures about 45'7" tip to tip there. So we're hoping to see at least the 11-foot width lanes, if not a little wider.
And I think the 11-foot is a deal breaker there. The engineers say they can get 11-foot. The city's saying we need 11-foot. The adjacent landowner says 11-foot the minimum because it does limit what could go in there is the traffic.
Sarah, as different people talk here, I'd like to get real clear in my mind. We have 3 different owners. Who owns what? Can you take your
Okay,
pointer and
sure.
kind of outline that for me?
Coho owns everything adjacent to Willow Creek Drive and 212 in this area up to this line, right?
That's all one owner?
That's, let me turn on the
And
ownership,
that's, okay.
see if that will flash.
So basically, the biggest 2 owners is Coho owns everything to the east and part north, and Morris owns everything north and west. And we're here trying to put a plan together for the person who owns the smallest piece of the land. And that's the dilemma we're at, where we look and go, how do we keep everybody happy? The two big guys
Own the majority
haven't moved
of it.
forward yet. And we got the guy who owns the smallest piece says, hey, I got a buyer and I want to move forward, but he's going to could possibly drive what happens to the other owners, and those other owners have a very large stake in this game.
True.
So, sir, Coho's preliminary plan has expired, and did they say they're coming back next month to review that?
We could, I mean, I was gonna mention that at the end of the meeting under old business. It has expired. How do you wanna proceed? They're interested in, reviewing it as well. I mean, they're not against looking at it. They'd like to iron that business out with the landscaping and the lane widths. I mean, 11 is kinda narrow. It's less expensive than 12. 12 is more of a standard. It's a little more spacious. We could talk about those things.
You know, we're put in this position often where we're retrofitting something or we're putting the cart before the horse somewhere, but we're also in a spot where we'd like to see some development out there and some movement, and one thing spurs another. Everybody has the same goal in mind. It's just how do we get there and keep everybody happy?
I think a lot of this, Pat, depends on what, as you said a minute ago, what the two big boys want and what their feeling is towards the one parcel in the middle. I think we have to consider, and I haven't heard necessarily any feelings from them. Does anybody want to talk here? Or, I mean, we have a letter, I realize, but it hasn't been brought public. It's laying in front of us, but anyway, we're going to talk about it?
Do you want that read into the record?
I think that's more on the variance side at the Board of Adjustment, as that's how I took it. That was more of a Board of Adjustment
There's some
action.
items in there that are pertinent for the preliminary plan, the utilities. It covers both of them.
Yeah, I guess I can highlight it. We all have copies of it. They have some issues with FEMA drainage, fire hydrants that we've talked about, the right-of-way and the protection of that gateway district on 212. I think their biggest issue was the request for a 5-foot variance on a setback. I think because that does, you know, and I look at it and go, yeah, what goes in out there does have an effect on everything out there. But you can't wait for everybody to develop all at once. It's kind of the first guy that's got a buyer out there and move. But
Mr.
Mayor
Chairman,
Thorpe.
if I may, I'd like to address 8th Avenue. The city has been in discussion with Coho, so we are anxiously awaiting for them to get this preliminary plan out there, because we will be bringing this forward to the city to see if they would entertain the idea of putting that street in early, 8th Avenue, and we're expecting that Sarah, of course, would be on top of what we need there. So I think it will spur development. So the sooner they can get that done, the better, and it would help develop that area. So
And what that would require is a review of that preliminary plan and plat it. Because
Exactly.
once it's platted, then I think once it's platted and the infrastructure goes in, then development gets moved into a higher gear than it is now.
It is.
And it keeps us from being put in the position we are today.
Yeah, because we've had discussions with the utilities and everybody so that we understand getting the electrical and the water and the gas in there. So, of course, Sarah and her team would be working on the storm sewers, and we depend a lot upon that engineering department. So I just wanted to reiterate that we are anxiously awaiting for something to happen out here and anxiously wanting them to get this done so we can do something.
Yeah, and Sarah, in the process, the master plans, Mayor, that you just talked about, maybe just wait just a second. That's so beneficial for us to have now, but on the developer side of the coin, if you master plan and file that plat, okay, the clock starts ticking, and you can get caught up in the taxes in the real estate, and that can be very difficult. But you can still have a master plan, and it's just on paper, but at least everybody around you knows what you're doing. So when the day comes that you want to proceed with the master plan, then you actually put it into motion. So it doesn't tie your hands to have a master plan, or it doesn't necessarily totally 100% commit you to that. Am I correct? I'm
Yes.
just, from
Absolutely.
experience, that's
It's
what
a-
I'm
yeah, it's a
stating, because I know there's a
preliminary
hesitancy, and you can still get your roads in, or you can
Right.
still get your infrastructure in, but you can't sell anything off until you file it. Correct?
You can sell land, yes, but you don't necessarily have a building right.
You don't have a building right. Yeah.
And you know, going back to.
And I don't think, no, I'm correct, you can't sell land until you file it. When you file a plat on that parcel of ground,
No,
whatever
you
it
can
is.
sell land without having it platted. Land does not have to be platted.
We're saying from the city, though, you have to have a master plan and plat it.
To have building
But the
right.
plat
To have-
doesn't, huh?
To have a building right,
have
it
a
has to be
To have a
platted.
building right.
You could sell it by legal description. I own the dirt, but I can't build anything until I have it platted. Is
Right,
that correct?
that's the situation we're in right now. That
It's
land-
sold by legal description, not
Right.
by lot.
Right, has never been platted, but they want a building permit, so they're going through the platting process.
Okay, but they have a master plan. They have it all decided what they want to do, okay? It's all agreed on. It's gone, everybody's jumped through the hoops on it. But they have lot 4 out there that all of a sudden somebody comes along and wants to buy. Okay? Then they can file that, they can have an address and so forth. They don't sell it by legal, they sell it by lot 4, and that gets filed at the courthouse. But they do not have to file lot 2 and 3 or 5 and 6. They can just file 4 and file it at the courthouse and sell it. Correct?
By filed, you mean plat?
By plat.
Yes.
By
But
plat,
the-
not by legal, by
the-
plat.
Right, but with the plat, I mean, lot 4 is in the middle, and that's maybe why you chose that one.
That's
The-
why I chose
The
it.
infrastructure
You
needs to
have
be
to
in
have the
place.
infrastructure to
Right,
it, but
and
if you
then-
have the infrastructure and you file a lot or 2, utilities will bring you what you need.
Yes and
and
no.
start to put the
If-
wheels in
If you had a
motion.
preliminary plan for this whole area approved, and you wanted to plat 4, its utilities come across 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So there has to be a letter of assurance or a development agreement to say who is responsible for installing those and who pays for it. And that is recorded at the same time as the plat. So that's probably the more, the
It is,
heavier
but you don't,
question.
as a developer, you don't have to put it all in, and you don't have to pay for it all up front.
Right,
You do
and
it in
generally you would
phases,
start-
but you know where your start point is, and you know where your end point is,
Right.
and where you're
The
gonna go with it.
phasing should
Might
be-
take you 5 years to get there before it's all done, but at least you got to start on it.
The phasing
and
should
everybody
be
around you
discussed in the
knows.
preliminary plan. It can be changed, but you should
Yeah.
discuss that and say, here's what we expect, that we'll start from the east or we'll start from the west. We'll proceed. And the utilities then will be able to support the development as it grows.
Yeah.
Right now, we have,
I think the reason I'm bringing this up, the hesitancy for a developer is, I have a lot of ground here, and I see that I can do lots of things with it, but I can also get myself backed into a corner all of a sudden. My goodness, I've got a lot of land here, and my taxes, now all of a sudden, they're starting to come back at me in real estate, and I haven't sold anything, and you can get upside down real fast.
right,
But you can still master plan it and have it all platted, so, and then when, little
Right.
by little by little, you begin to put it
we
in.
see that all the time.
And
Normal, actually. It's
That's what would
normal
be
to have a
nice in this
preliminary
whole area,
plan
if people could do it. They don't have to
Platting
file anything, they don't have to go to
occurs
courthouse with it,
Bite by bite.
but everybody knows. Yeah, exactly, bite by bite, piece by piece.
I also wanted to address one other little thing. When I don't know how old Rod is, but he said that this won't happen in his lifetime when the three of them would get together. We've had really some very good discussions with Coho and the Morris family. Those two are constantly talking back and forth, and that's the largest chunk of what you're dealing with. I think with the third party, we can try to get them to the table, and I think before Rod's gone, we'll get her done.
So as we go full circle back around, we go through most of what's there. What we're here to do is approve or disapprove a preliminary plan. I think the one thing, as I look through, it seems like the owners in the city are in general agreement with most all parts. The only thing that's probably going to hang most of us up is the fire protection and the fire hydrant side of it, and I saw Chip left. Rod, what was the owner's plans for fire protection? Just to drag a hose across the highway? And it's probably a concern of a lot of people, including the fire department. The building's going to be full of paint.
Well, good afternoon. I am Wade Beam. Excuse me, frog in my throat here. I am with Lloyd Companies. and we represent the building owner and the building owner's tenant, which is Sherwin-Williams. It's probably most important to understand on the fire protection point of view that it is a non-sprinklered building. Now, of course, if there was a sprinkler there, we probably wouldn't have to worry about a fire hydrant anyways. But it is a non-sprinkler building, being 4,000 square foot. That's an acceptable way to build a building. More importantly, it's type 2B, non-combustible. All 4 walls are CMU, bar joist roof. Interior is metal stud framing, drywall, so, all non-combustible components. So that kind of, and I wish the fire marshal was still here as well, because I think he would probably nod that, yeah, that's probably what we would want to see on that lot in order for us to be happy with having a fire hydrant that was 300 plus feet across the street. Wanting to erect a $600,000 building and then looking at, having to throw another 50 or 60 or 80 or whatever it's going to be to pull a fire hydrant across the street, across 212 to bore that over, that's not an expense we really want to bear. I'm happy to hear that, the fire department is okay on an interim basis with, looking at that piece that's on the south side of 212 as being, kind of a sort of a good interim way to do it. Yeah, they'd have to shut down traffic on 212, but that might be the interim, the way to do it. But, getting back to the building itself, non-combustible construction usually bodes a little bit better for those scenarios.
While you're up here, they said that, we're gonna, in the future, it's necessary to put a footbridge across there. Are you guys fine with participating in that, or, because the city's gonna cover some of that cost? The right-of-way doesn't allow for anything with the culvert to put a sidewalk across there for pedestrians. We're gonna need to do some sort of a footbridge, and are you guys comfortable with that?
That I'd probably have to take back to the owner or the purchaser of the lot. I assume that a footbridge, if it got put in and was made that the development needed to take part in it, that we're talking about, the whole development. And now we're talking, kind of the 3 original landowners that have been kind of the basis of discussion, and not just, say, a Sherwin-Williams site, not just one guy footing the bill. But if that was gonna be the case, they'd be more amenable to it, I'm sure. But I can't answer, with a firm yes without consulting them on it.
Wade, you got some examples of the other projects you guys have done with Sherwin-Williams and maybe similar to this type of deal?
In what regard?
Other buildings maybe that weren't close to a fire hydrant, what was done in the prior, and other projects you guys done?
Well, frankly, I'll admit, we're pioneering a little bit over here. Hey, we know we're the first guys in. We know we're asking for a lot of things to happen, and we're hoping to be a little bit of a catalyst here. It's not often where we get very far away from a fire hydrant. I think in my career I've done it a couple of times. And we've gotten out to 300-400 feet, and usually you just kind of work out a special plan with the fire department. Just means there's a little bit of a meeting of the minds, get together on it, and to establish a protocol, so that when there is, when the bell rings, these guys know, okay, we're going to that address, and we know there's a special consideration.
Sarah, if this area is developed and the ditch being very deep and basically a drainage way for the whole land there, what would be the idea on sidewalks along that 212? Would there be, or is it possible to build sidewalks there or not?
Along 212?
Yeah, east and west along 212.
I think that's something that the city's been thinking about quite a bit, and thinking someday there probably would be a trail or bike path. And I think we've been collecting commitments, and we haven't been requiring sidewalks along 212 with the recent developments, but we collect a commitment that if there's ever an area-wide pedestrian path there, that the developers commit to participating in the cost.
The waiver of right to protest that we always use.
Okay, thank you. Anything else in the open? Anyone else have anything to say? With that, I'll close the open. I'll ask for a motion and a second for discussion. To recap, when it comes to a motion, the things we've talked about is the approval of the preliminary plan. Fire hydrant, the width of the lanes, which were included in the concerns of the DRT team, the green space easement to make sure that aesthetically that the owner is willing to put the sidewalk and any trees necessary onto the private property rather than the right-of-way, so it looks consistent as 26th Street goes north there. And then a waiver right to protest on the sidewalk / footbridge as to what it would be. I think those are the areas. Anything else that we're missing as we talked
I think the
about?
footbridge would be included in the waiver right to protest for sidewalk.
Correct.
I would like to see the footbridge included in the motion, because you're gonna have to be able to get across that culvert somehow.
Correct. You know, I mean, we had, you know, our lane issue was a big thing, fire protection, and I think the fire protection's a tough one. I can understand a guy not wanting to spend $60,000 or $80,000 to get fire across to find out you only needed it for 6 months until that road was platted and it was put in, but it could be 4 years or 5 years too. So it's just kind of a leap of faith that we have, that once we get a catalyst of some building out there, that the rest would move with it. Anything else I'm missing? Green space, lane width, and waiver to right on the extension of a sidewalk, footbridge, trail, whatever.
Are you looking at putting together a motion? 'Cause
I'm just trying to go over, I'm gonna ask for a motion and a second for a vote, and I'm just trying to recap what we go.
Enumerated in the proposed, they have a copy here? Of the resolution,
Yeah.
itemizing the issues, if you want to strike any of those or add anything to it. They're listed.
Yeah, and meaning 1 through 14.
No, I mean, if you,
Oh.
there's a resolution which has kind of boiled it down.
So it'll be the approval of the resolution 2015-02.
Approves the preliminary plan with conditions.
Yours was that it's platted within 3 years, obtain the stormwater permit, enter into a development agreement with 26th Street when it comes to fire hydrants, turnarounds, which we talked about, and then all the DOT things. Yeah, you know, the one thing is 33 feet of asphalt, that's the 11-foot lanes. This resolution, does it address the extension of sidewalks to whatever trail is put in there? I don't
It
see it.
says 10-foot wide sidewalk adjacent to the culvert and 5 foot on each side of the road. So it's saying putting it one pedestrian path.
Mhm.
And the part that we've waived in the past is not the part that comes up to where the future trail would be. I mean, this would be different. We haven't had them on the side of the street where we've got this big drainage way. We haven't dealt with that yet. You could include that in the waiver of right to protest if you wanted to or not, but across the street, if people are, you know, you don't see pedestrians very often, but we do have sidewalks across, and if someone was running across the street or, you know, not that we want to encourage that.
As this,
It's up to you, I guess. You put that in the waiver if you want.
as this resolution is written, you said a
It's not
10-foot,
in the waiver as the resolution's written.
you say a 10-foot wide sidewalk on the downstream side of the culvert and 5-foot wide on both sides elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really necessarily address a footbridge across the culvert.
Well, the sidewalk would be on a bridge. It would have to be on a bridge.
Okay, so this.
I didn't say that in there,
all right,
but
So
that's
the
under.
intent is
The
to
intent,
have.
yeah, however
okay.
they want to do it. It could also be done with a widening of the culvert, if it comes to that.
Item number 4 there, the applicant's required to obtain all necessary permits from the DOT. We assume that they'll request and gain access to all.
Right, the deal's off if the DOT would for some reason say
Right,
no. They're not
right,
gonna say no.
Right, so we're okay there. Stan had mentioned the applicant is required to request or obtain. You know, if, what our protection there is if the DOT says no on anything, we can't proceed any farther, and I assume that's standard.
I was, Sarah, thinking that what if in number 3, the requiring of the ADA sidewalk compliant ramps and US Highway 212 right-of-way, that was the one I was looking at. What if the DOT said, no, not at that location, we don't like it there, that they, I mean, could that happen? And then what does that do to this resolution? Could the DOT say, you know, we, not at that spot? Because it's saying that they're gonna sign an agreement that they're gonna do it. I'm just wondering what if
Does
the
number
DOT
4 erase that, though? If they say, they make a condition on their approval that there aren't any sidewalks in their right-of-way? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe I'm not making myself clear. I'm just wondering, as to that particular item, because it is the state's right-of-way, if they say, not at that spot, we don't want sidewalks there, yet we're saying that they're gonna install them up in number 3, you understand what I'm saying, I hope.
Right, but we generally require developers to put sidewalk, ADA compliant ramps for sidewalks in highway rights-of-way adjacent to their property.
And I'm just anticipating, what if at this location they would say no
Yeah,
for
if
some
they
reason?
said no, is that not covered by number 4?
They're required to obtain all necessary permits. I'm saying, what if the state says no, and they can't obtain
Yeah.
that particular
Well, how
permit?
would you suggest we rewrite that?
We can wordsmith it. Something to the nature of, they're required to request, and if granted,
Yes,
install the
okay.
appropriate improvements.
So there's a slight modification on under 3, instead of, or number 4, where it says required to obtain it all. Stanton said they should request and comply with all that are granted. So we'll get that off the audio on this. And then, John, you wanted to add one thing on there in regard to the drainage issue we talked about earlier. We want the assurance that we're not going to be draining their water onto the neighbor's land, and we were assured that
Right.
by the engineer.
So I'd like to have something in here that says that they will not adversely affect the adjacent landowners with drainage issues.
All right. So with that, I'll ask for a motion and a second in regard to Resolution 2015-02.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
I just want to verify the 5-foot sidewalk is what you now require parallel to the existing property where the building's going to go
Versus the 4?
5 foot was in the preliminary plan, approved preliminary plan that has expired, but I'm just assuming we would perpetuate that because that's what the ADA is expected to be that someday in the near future. Right now, the ADA requires 4, but the previously approved preliminary plan showed 5. So I wrote 5. If you're okay with 4, we can change it to 4.
It's just the specs I'm working off when I did the variances with a 4-foot sidewalk, that's all I'm saying. So now the
Oh,
13.33
oh, I
will
didn't
change.
catch that.
Well, I think we should, and 4 is standard,
Standard,
correct.
current.
And 4 is what 26th Street's going to have and what 8th
5
Avenue
is
is
what
going
the
to have
preliminary plan
for
showed.
8th Avenue.
For 8th Avenue, not 4. 4 is difficult for 2 people to pass, and
State, our city ordinance says how much, Ken? 4 or 5?
4
Interesting. Okay.
What will Willow Creek have? What's that?
there's a trail on Willow
That's
Creek.
8, that's a trail.
The overlay district
The
is
trail is
4 or
10.
5?
Hmm?
I think the trail's
Everything
10.
perpendicular, parallel to Willow Creek or First Avenue North bypass, or whatever you want to call it. That's already been put in.
All right, I have a
I just
motion.
want clarification on that. So the rest of, are we going with 4 or 5 on this?
Well, the preliminary plan that the Plan Commission approved in the past was 5-foot sidewalks. I know that's expired, but, if you're,
Okay. Yeah,
I just put 5 in there
Before I
because-
vote, I just want to know,
Yeah.
is it 5 or 4?
And it's 5 on there, and it was done to match up to the adjacent preliminary plan, I assume.
26th Street was included in the preliminary plan, so it's just this property wasn't included,
Okay.
the private part of it.
I have a motion by Mr. McGuire,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Lawrence. Any further discussion?
So what, 5 foot?
Yeah, the preliminary plan says a 5-foot sidewalk, and that's what they've been working with, so. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Third item on the agenda is old business. Do we have any?
The old business would be revisiting the preliminary plan at the next meeting or whenever.
I think so, if we can get
the-
with Coho on it and validate that. Item number 4, new business. I would like to make one note. I know we've been running late and we got to keep moving. The DRT review team, I'd like to add a couple members of the Plan Commission on there, so they're there, and it doesn't need to be someone, the same person every time. When there's a design review team meeting, if we can shoot out an email and see if we can get a couple people that might want to go there, I think that's where we're going to learn how these are laid out and what the staff's concerns is. I think that's going to be our best learning tool. No, it's here upstairs.
It's just a staff, the DRT team is an advisory group to the city engineer. The city engineer reviews the concept plan and approves it. And the city engineer can bring the concept plan to the Plan Commission, as I did with Stony Point. I didn't with this one, we're in a big giant
Yeah.
rush.
No, and that's not a problem. I was just, when I saw that, I thought, that'd be something kind of nice. And it might be where it goes out and says, hey, we have a design review team meeting on this subject. It goes to everybody, first couple people that say, hey, I can make that meeting. I'm interested in it. It'd help us understand the engineering side of it and the city's concerns. It would also help us when we get here, if one or two of us might have been there that can kind of shed some light on some things and make the walk a little easier. But
Sure.
just something I'd like to think about. Item number 5, no executive session. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lawrence, second by Mr. Dolly. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries. Apologize for the length of the meeting, but some of this stuff is complicated for a noon meeting. And welcome to Mr. Stein. You're now on our Board of Adjustment. Bet you're happy. Welcome. Ray, do you have to stop and start or anything? Okay, I'd like to call to order the Watertown Board of Adjustment, Wednesday, February 4th, 2015. Roll call.
Stein? Here.
Here.
Stonebarger?
Here.
Arnold?
Here.
Shriver?
Here.
Lawrence?
Here.
Dolly?
Here.
McGuire?
Here.
Johnson and Johnson are absent. We have a quorum.
First item on the agenda is an application, Virginia D. Bauer Revocable Trust. Variance number, permit number 15927, the appeal the terms of the zoning ordinance in regard to setback on a commercial building.
Right, thank you. Again, I stated this application for permit number 15927. Of course, this is the same property you just discussed within the Plan Commission. Applicant was submitted requesting to construct a non-conforming 4,000 square foot, 50 by 80 commercial building on a 22,344 square foot parcel. Said structure proposed to be constructed 15 feet from the sidewest property line, where a minimum of 20 feet is required, and 13.33 Grass Boulevard in the east right-of-way, where a minimum of 15 is required. Application was denied based on the following ordinance regulations: 210302, 211003, 216001, 216002. Staff finds this parcel is located in the C3 Highway Commercial District as well as the GT1 Gateway District Overlay District, the purpose and intent of which is specified in 215401. It is the purpose and intent of the Watertown City Council and Watertown Planning Commission to establish a district with certain design standards for property visible within the designated corridors at key points in the city. This bare lot, almost 1 acre, 22,344 square feet, exceeds the minimum area and width requirements for development in both the C3 and the G1 Gateway districts. And then we've kind of already discussed this already. I think you guys put it in there in your plat thing, as requiring the sidewalk adjacent to 212. Did that just come as being part of the plat issuance, or are we going to discuss it as a waiver right to protest in this issuance? if approved.
I think the one along 212 would be a waiver right to protest.
Yeah, that would be my assumption. I assume what we were talking, most of the sidewalk issues I was visiting about was 26th Street, correct?
So basically, it gets down to just the two issues, and it's the 15-foot west property line setback of 15 feet. And again, it's not on here, but if you're looking on your sheet, from the back of the sidewalk to the back of the sidewalk in their parking lot is 13.33 versus the 15, so it's 1.66 short. Now, the main reason I was bringing up the issue about the 5-foot versus 4-foot sidewalk is the distance between the back of the curb and the existing sidewalk at 4 feet is 6 feet, which meets the interior landscape requirements within those areas that aren't adjacent to 212 or Willow Creek. When that moved to 5 feet, now it's down to 5 feet. And it does not meet the landscape requirements for planting a tree in that area, which I just became aware of 2 minutes ago.
Perfect. Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the variance. And has it turned into 2 variances now? One for the back and one for the,
It's always been 2. The 15-foot and the 13.33 required green space area. With the little cliffhanger now, the tree not being able to meet the landscape requirement in the boulevard directly in front of it because of the sidewalk going from 4 to 5 feet. And that's now a 5-foot distance between that curb and the sidewalk versus a 6-foot, and 6 foot is legal.
So when you're talking about the trees, you're, on this plan, it shows 2 trees in that area, is that what?
Those 2 trees there, correct?
Okay.
Otherwise, they have met all other landscape requirements requested by ordinance, and they had proposed to meet that one also. They have the letter. Did they?
okay, can you real quick give us, this falls in our Gateway Overlay Protection District. And when this land from here all the way back, the First Avenue extension was proposed, the owners that own that land agreed and requested that we put it in a Gateway Overlay Protection District. I think probably just myself and Mr. Arnold were around in those days. Can you highlight the Overlay Protection District as what the difference is, what their requirements are in that district that are different than our normal C3 zoning district?
Not without the ordinance book right in front of me. I'm sorry. The Gateway District actually is from 19th, of course, then to Willow Creek Drive, the old First Avenue, and 212. Within this district, basically, anything that's adjacent to First Avenue North and 212 does have a greater tree replacement. It's one per 40 feet versus one per 50 feet. It's got the bigger boulevard requirement for the trail, which is basically 8 foot going in there. They have got restricted entrances like they discussed at the Plan Commission, not closer than 400 feet for shared driveways.
Building color?
Yeah, there's building color requirements.
Signage?
Signage requirements, setback requirements.
What we tried to do was, our goal was, this is a gateway to Watertown. It's going to have a different look. We're going to step it up a little bit. And due to the valuations of those properties and what people thought it would look like, everybody was in agreement that we are going to hold ourselves to a different set of standards. Luke?
You've pretty well hit on everything that's within the Gateway Overlay District. The main focus was on Willow Creek Drive, which is listed as First Avenue in the district, and then also 9th Avenue. Otherwise, it's the standards you talked about. It's building materials, even some color standards. Tree plantings along those roadways, which defaulted back to the landscape ordinance if it wasn't along First Avenue and Highway 212. And then interior tree plantings, of which I think it amounted to 1 extra tree for this particular site in the end. And then also a couple of requirements as far as where parking and loading facilities, loading docks can be. Mostly, it's, as you said, it's a higher aesthetic state.
That's right, and we had a few side yard grassed area buffers to ensure that there'd be not just endless arrays of pavement.
Setbacks, what were I think the front yard setback was different, wasn't it?
The front yard setback is based on where you put your parking. If you put all your parking in the rear of the building, then you can take the front yard setback down to 20 feet, I believe, in the C district. If you leave your parking in the front, then you stay back at the 40 feet.
So Ken, do you have this that you can put up on the overhead?
Do I have that to put up on the overhead? Well, let's see here. I'll get the gentleman to turn their light on, I will.
So the only difference by making a 5-foot sidewalk is that tree and that tree wouldn't be there, right?
Well, those two trees either won't be there, or we're gonna allow them to plant them in a 5-foot space versus a 6-foot space.
Okay, that's the
Which-
only difference between the 4-foot and the 5-foot.
That is
sidewalk.
correct,
Okay.
from what was cited previously, yep. And then the distance we're talking about is the back of the curb here, the back of the curb there is 13.33 on this one versus the 15-foot required, so it's 1.67 feet less than what it would have been before. And again, the only setback we're talking about is in the 15 feet on this side versus the 20 off of the backyard to the west.
John and Dennis had a question on sidewalk. We said, did we actually, the overlay protection, or the preliminary plan said a 5-foot sidewalk there. The lots north of this are not in the overlay district requirement in a 5-foot sidewalk. They'll have a 4-foot sidewalk, correct?
Or whatever your preliminary plan says you guys are gonna have.
Right, unless somebody in the preliminary plan for the lots north of 8th Avenue, our landscape ordinance says lots in Watertown have to have a 4-foot sidewalk.
Correct.
So, that will apply to everything north of this.
But did Sarah just say that ADH is gonna, or
They may,
disabilities
but
is
they haven't
probably
yet.
going to
ADA
5-foot?
right now says 4 feet on this day. And the reason we approved a 5-foot sidewalk is that's what the preliminary plan that was presented to us in 2011, which didn't include that lot, but it did include that road. And like our main concern was we wanted aesthetically it to look the same. We didn't want anything to look like it was neck down or we cut corners.
I could round out the sidewalk there for a little bit.
Okay, I open the public hearing. The question I have, and it's a tough one. We went through the hard work on the planning side. I really have an issue, given a 5-foot variance on the first building built in the overlay protection district. When we grant variances, it's generally due to an uncommon occurrence. It's topography, it's slope, it's a pie-shaped lot. This is a perfectly shaped lot. It's 20,000 square feet. The minimum, it's not a non-conforming lot. A non-conforming lot, what are we, 10,000 in C3?
I think this is.
But it's not a non-conforming lot. There's nothing non-conforming about this lot other than the fact that you want to put a bigger building and parking lot on there than the lot can seemingly carry. And I think that's my assumption is most people up here are going to have a real issue given a 15-foot setback on a brand-new building because we're going to have a whole bunch of buildings coming in after this one. And it's the precedence we set.
Okay, well, Wade Beam again, Lloyd Companies. Maybe to answer that question, it's probably best to kind of, backtrack on, why we have the building size we have, kind of what other standards I'm working under to actually fit this site. Sherwin-Williams is the tenant of the building. This is the third building we've built for them. They work under a very stringent prototype standard, as I'm sure you're aware, many kind of national retailers, national restaurants, et cetera, do. Their prototype is a 50-foot wide building. They do 50 by 80 and 50 by 90, okay? But nevertheless, it's the 50-foot dimension that we are that we're dealing with today. We start with that 50-foot dimension. We try to push that as far west on the parcel as we can. The next standard is the 7-foot sidewalk. And the next standard after that is the 22-foot parking stall. The 22-foot parking stall, some of you may get there that that's a longer than normal parking stall. As you know, Sherwin-Williams is a paint store. Sherwin-Williams serves both retail consumers as well as contractors. So the east side of the building is primarily meant for contractor parking. Large vans, loading, being able to traverse the sidewalk with carts, things like that. So that's kind of why the stalls are the width that they are. And then, of course, you get beyond the parking stalls and you get to the standard 24-foot drive lane. So when we started, when we looked at this site initially, we probably made a poor assumption in that there was only going to be a 10-foot setback until we actually got the information we needed. So that's kind of, we got a little bit further down the road with the purchase agreement and things to get us, thinking this is the site we really wanted to latch on to. But as we, kind of talked through it and kind of talked with, with staff and we it seemed like it was a 25% reduction in that side yard was probably not going to be as big a deal. But, that's why we're here talking about it. When I've built these buildings and similar buildings before, and I've now built buildings in going on 25 states, I would say that this C3 zoning and a 20-foot side yard setback is a much wider setback than most model zoning codes, most model zoning ordinances would afford. So I mean, it is a large setback. Secondly, setbacks are kind of put there for numerous different reasons. For maintaining density standards, fire protection, landscape buffers, aesthetics, a number of different things. Once again, I'll get back to the non-combustible nature of our building. So when it comes to building code and fire standards, the type of construction that we're contemplating here, should kind of take care of that end of things. It's been, my experience that if we are asking for some sort of a reduction in a setback, that usually there might be some trade-offs. And, and again, in the experience that I have in other states and other jurisdictions, some of those trade-offs might be, ask me to do more of a berm, ask me to do more landscaping on that side, do some things like that to kind of boost the aesthetics. But, the rest of it, the building size, the sidewalk width, the parking stall width, those are kind of things that are near and dear to the tenant. And, I think those are probably deal breaker kind of things for them to try to be adjusting those.
Oh, I have one question for you. What's the slope of the roof on here? Does it slope, everything slope towards that 15-foot side?
Yes, it does.
This is a question we ask quite a bit when things come in and we have to use a variance or a board of adjustment. Is this the only lot or the only place that you guys have looked at?
We have looked at other lots. And price, visibility, and access have kicked us out of those other lots.
Okay, thank you.
And timing.
Anything else?
If I understand, you purchased this property unaware of the restrictions.
The purchase is not complete. So we are now fully aware of the restrictions and are obviously here because we are aware and need to figure out whether or not we can proceed with the transaction.
You made the statement earlier in your explanation that you had talked to staff and maybe reducing the size of the building wasn't necessarily out of the question?
I didn't get the read that it was a deal breaker. Obviously, there's a variance process for exceptions to be made.
To get the full 50, you'd have to have a variance. But if your building was reduced in size or moved slightly to the east a little bit and narrowed up that 24 foot, that would not be a deal breaker? You could either reduce the, okay, here's what I'm asking. You could either, would there be a possibility of reducing the width of the building? Or if you didn't, if didn't want to reduce the width, you could take a little bit of that 24 feet. You do not have parking, so those cars can still back out on 24 feet and turn and drive out the driveway. Ken, you're shaking your head no.
Well, the
but-
24 feet is the standard. We don't want to see them reduced. The
Okay.
22-foot parking stall depth is actually only 18.5 for the city of Watertown,
And we don't require the 7-foot sidewalk.
and we're only down to a 5-foot sidewalk.
So we could.
Let
we-
him put
we-
it, let him, he says corporate says you have to have 22 feet. Paint your line back to 20. You know, the width is there. You've
You're
got 24
wily.
and 22. I mean, you can play those games, can't you?
Well, it's like a game of football. It's a
Rather
game- it's
than,
a-
rather
it's-
than
it's a
us to
game of
have to give
inches.
you a variance when you've got plenty of room on the other side.
Once again, I mean, working with, your set of standards and their set of standards and trying to find something that works. So to answer your first question, no, the building width cannot reduce, because it's based on a standard fixture layout, standard fixture plan. That's, again, national concept. They'll walk away before they let me reduce the building. The 7 foot, we've asked them to reduce the 7 foot before. We kind of got turned down. We found another way out, and on another site, we've asked them to reduce the 7 foot. We found another way, so we didn't have to. So it seemed like that was going to be a negative on that site. We haven't proposed it to them on this site. The 22 foot is, I would say, is the more excessive, piece, because like Ken said, parking stall standards are 18 and a half feet here. We're accustomed to seeing them 19 feet, so we're 3 foot. But at 3 foot, we're still, if I knock that down to a standard, if I could get Sherwin-Williams to agree with that, I'm still asking for a variance.
But those cars that pull into that parking stall are still gonna pull up till their front tires hit the curb. And Watertown has determined that 18 and a half is adequate to back out and make the swing. So the back of the car is gonna be in the same place, no matter where that line is painted to.
Right. But what I'm also, you gotta understand that, I understand the way the standards are here, but I'm
Yeah.
dealing with a national tenant standard as well. That is at 22 feet.
And I will attest to that. I mean, all of our parking lots in our apartments are 18, 24, 18. And when you get a long box 4-door or even a 4-door truck in there, it's a multi-point turn.
So you say 18 is not long enough.
I'm saying if that's what they're looking for is contractors and that's what they're supplying for, it's possible to do it, but it is a multi-point turn. I mean, it's not just a back out type of thing. It's back forward, back forward, back forward, out. I mean, you drive up there after this, try it. As much as I like we didn't have the room to do it any bigger. We did a little bigger on our second one. We added a couple feet in there, which helps out a little bit, but it's tight on an 18, 24, 18. Well, I have parking on both sides, but at 18, 24 is a tight.
The other thing, they
Well,
don't have parking on both sides here. Those boxes will go out over that. It's
Right,
tire
you do
to
not have
tire.
parking,
It's
but
tire to
the
tire.
point I'm
there.
trying to make is we want this to go. We don't want this to be a deal breaker, but we also have the first lot, the first building in a large area in an overlay district, and I hate to make an exception right on the very first one. If there's a way that we can make it work and live within your parameters and the cities, and I think there is.
Dennis, dealing with a lot of these national franchises, and I know Pat Schreiber does too with
Right.
leasing stuff out. I agree with you on that, but
Well, I'm saying I think we can meet their standards
But I think
and fit within the city.
it's really hard to run things up a flagpole with the national companies and run it back down because there's just so many different variables. So many different hoops you gotta go through and so
Right.
forth. And it's kinda like a Walmart, they got a certain standard, and a Target store has a certain standard, and Little Caesar Pizza has a little, has a standard. So, it's just not, just go in and do that. So.
Is
there-
24 feet a standard?
24 feet is your standard.
Okay, that's our standard.
Yes.
But our standard is 24 plus 18.
18
The
and a
only
half.
standard you have is 22.
Correct.
So my point is, you've got adequate space to park those vehicles and come out and swing and meet your standards and ours and have adequate room. We don't have any cars parked behind you. There is no parallel parking. There is no diagonal parking the other way. See what I'm saying? And put the building where it needs to be and narrow up.
What
49 feet is enough to
would you
turn,
guys go to
46 feet is
to
enough to turn
diagonal
around.
parking?
You see what I'm
You
saying?
shorten it up there as well.
The diagonal parking doesn't work because the guys like to back in. And it's, you know, which way are you coming from? How's the traffic flow gonna work? The reason it's a 24-foot drive lane is because they're contemplating two-way traffic. So, yeah, you know, I've been up and down this party with them, you know, several times, and it's not an easy one for them either, you know.
I guess the thing I see the most is it is 15 feet and your entire building is draining that direction onto the other people. We did make a I don't know, agreement that you weren't going to hinder any runoff on that direction onto someone else's plan. That's 4,000 square feet of impermeable surfaces dumping out to the west.
We gotta be careful about though, talking that draining on 15 foot of my
yours.
land
Yep.
will hinder the neighbor. Cause I do have 15 foot to get that water to channelize and go south.
Yep, that's my biggest concern is I want to make sure that is happening. I don't want, you know, we don't want that 4,000 square feet of runoff, I guess, to end up on someone else's property. And
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear on that one. And well, first off, I trust in Rod, and I think a lot of you guys do too. So we'll make sure he comes up with something. And worst case, if we can't get it by simply channelize, you know, by natural grade, then we're going to put a storm pipe in there and collect it and dump it out into the ditch. So it's going to be, we'll do what we got to do there.
So the way I look at it is on the east side of the building, we got a 7-foot sidewalk, a 22-foot parking stall, and 24 feet between the back of the curb and the end of the parking stall, which my math, that gives me 53, is that right? We're saying 7 plus 22 plus 24, Common Core says 53 feet. You need a 5-foot variance to do that. If we strip 5 off of that and that variance isn't approved, you've got 48 feet between the building and the curb to get a sidewalk in your parking lot with stalls in there.
Right.
And you don't think 48 feet is enough to put a sidewalk, park a car, and get them pulled in and back out?
Well, the 24-foot is
Actually, the sidewalk's in the public right away.
No, the sidewalk up against the building.
my sidewalk.
I did the 7-foot sidewalk up against the building, a 22-foot stall, in a 24-foot section there. That gives us 53 feet. That's with the variance. Without the variance, he's got 48 feet to get a sidewalk, a parking, your parking stalls, and then your lane.
Right, but we gotta remember that the 24-foot is,
Our standard.
is fairly non-negotiable.
So it gives you 24 feet to have a parking stall and a sidewalk in there.
Right.
And like Dennis was saying, there's a 22-foot stripe there, but there's still 24 feet behind that to pull in and out of. Any other questions for him, fellas?
Do you see any area that you could accommodate your construction plan that would meet the requirements?
You know, if I was trying to reduce 22 to 21, or trying to reduce 22 to 20, I'd have a whole lot easier time. But then I'm still sitting here asking for a 3-foot variance, or I'm asking for a variance of some sort. Now, with each extra foot I get, my odds of being successful in moving forward at this project are dramatically improved. So, again, I'm dealing with as Commissioner McGuire said, we're dealing with national tenants, national standards, and trying to accommodate, your needs, neighbors' needs, city code, city ordinance, and trying to bring it all together here, so.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone else want to speak on behalf or against the permit?
I've got two questions.
Luke.
Thank you. Luke Muller, First District.
152.
Maybe this has already been addressed and I didn't hear it, but first question is more of a, maybe back for corporate, is whether or not they're married to the requirement of a two-way entrance. I'm betting that's probably the case. But if that could be a one-way entrance, perhaps that would decrease the lane width. Two is maybe an obvious question, but I just want to make sure that it's been asked or at least considered as to whether or not the purchase of 5 feet from the other side, the other property, is an option on a deal like this.
Thank you.
So, two-way traffic on the site, again, is part of the national standard. To try to, there's certainly multiple parking configurations and multiple entry configurations that people can utilize, diagonal parking and those kind of things. It's not something that Sherwin-Williams does. 90-degree parking, two-way drive paths are the most efficient parking configurations and drive configurations that there are. It really is the best use of land.
It also facilitates their trucks from being able to pull in, pull out, back in without, and when I say semis is when I say trucks, so.
Right.
So
Being
is
able to back contractor vans into the right space.
Is that why you want the drive-through, I guess? I mean, what would happen if you put the building the other way?
The other way.
Yeah, because you got 48 feet on the other side of it. If you swing the building, it's 50 feet wide. You swing it the other way, you have 90. You swing it that way. You have 48 feet now, and you just don't have the drive-through. You could put that building the other way and meet both setbacks.
We wouldn't fit all the parking on there that we needed at that
Okay.
point.
I don't know who did the drawing, but is it drawn with a 4-foot sidewalk or a 5-foot sidewalk?
4.
It's drawn with a 4?
Yep.
Well, okay, now we've lost another foot. I was hoping it was drawn with a 5. We approved it as a 5 a little while ago, but we didn't, but they only need 4, so we could
That's
have.
why I made the assumption at the time that it met our ordinance and everything else. I didn't realize Sarah said the rest of the planning and stuff said 5. So when I was doing my part of the code review for it, it was a 4-foot sidewalk, which I verified at the time, and it met all the other requirements within the landscaping, so.
Well, we have to consider that, folks, too. No, we're 1 short less. We're 1 foot less.
Well, the
because of
drawing's
what-
correct.
Because of what the planning commission approved, from what these numbers.
Right, and we could revisit that and allow 4 foot instead of
Yeah.
a 5 foot there.
No, it's not
as
gonna
was
take
in
away
the
from you
plan.
guys. The sidewalk's always in the right of way.
What?
The sidewalk's always in the right of way, so it's not taken away from any of the
So it's a
interior
back?
depth, so.
Well, that's
That's
true.
why I was talking, it's only gonna reduce the tree planting area from 6 feet now down to 5 feet in the boulevard. That was the other
And as
issue.
we know, trees need 6 feet. Otherwise, they're gonna die. They're gonna die
You
anyway.
have the option of saying, well, let's try 5. Come on.
We'll have to put some sort
What
of.
what is that space between the curb and the sidewalk as drawn?
5
What is
feet.
that?
6 feet, I'm sorry.
I think you're talking about.
Not,
that
no,
2 foot.
The 2 foot.
not
2
the,
foot.
not the street, between the parking lot curb, which I assume is a curb, and the sidewalk. What is that space?
2 foot.
2 foot, yeah. right
It's
there.
2 foot, what is it? Grass, dirt?
Well, it's
Why
supposed
does
to
it
be
have,
grass,
why
but
does that have to be there?
why does
Is
it
there a
have to
reason
be-
that's there, or is this
Why is
drawn
it-
that way? Or,
It's
Part of
supposed-
that.
It's supposed to be 3.5 feet, because, but
Part of
that's
that
one of the
green
variances we're
space.
asking for.
between the sidewalk and that parking lot curb,
He
supposed
could-
to be
there's
3.5
nothing- I mean,
feet?
there's, other than the 15-foot landscape requirement, there's nothing stopping him from putting that curb right down the property line. The only thing that prohibits
that's-
that is the 15-foot grand space, so
That's
if
my
you'd rather
question.
see that go away and gain another 2 feet over there, that's fine with me.
I'd a lot rather see that go away and put it on the other side of the building.
But then your parameters of 13.33 are gonna now drop down to,
Well, we're
11.33
getting
or
closer.
but yeah, you could pull 2
mean-
feet out of there and shove everything 2 feet to the east, if that's a lesser of two evils.
You see what I'm saying? There's, yeah, and then you take a 4-foot sidewalk. But that doesn't make any difference. I understand. He just said that the sidewalk doesn't make any difference because the back of the sidewalk's on the property line anyway. Yeah, but the 7-foot sidewalk adjacent to the building, that's corporate telling you that again, so that can't be changed.
Yeah,
Never,
the 7 foot has been a little more near and dear. If I had to lose, you know, if I just gained 2 foot on the east side, and if I could say, you know what, guys, I can live with 3 on the, 3 foot reduction on the west side, and, or even a 2 foot reduction, and talk Sherwin-Williams into shaving a foot off their stall and still, so they can still meet their contractor standards, now I'm playing the game of inches, and I think I can probably sell that.
and it's still, we still have to go back to the need for a variance on a lot, As we look, the land has to have unique conditions. It has to be usable in the zone it is. Without the variance, you would be deprived of the usable value of the land. That's not going to happen. The variance granted is the minimum necessary to make the land usable. We still go back to the nuts and bolts of a variance. Does this property actually need a variance for the owner of the land to use the land, to have any viable use on it at all? And the fact that it's in our gateway zone. But anybody else have any other questions? With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for discussion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Lawrence, second by Mr. Stonebarger.
As presented, your motion, just as presented, that's your motion? Or I'm just asking.
The hard part is you can modify things, but you can't modify things that weren't part of the public notice.
Okay, yeah, so we can discuss the green space requirement out front.
I would think so.
Okay, well then I'll just leave it as is for right now.
Is that what we were just told?
What's that?
We can modify it?
You can modify it in the motion. You have to modify it in your
If it
motion.
wasn't advertised that way?
Meaning what I'm saying there is what was advertised was a setback on one
I can
side,
amend my motion here in
correct?
5 minutes.
We modified the setback and we modified the lack of the 15-foot green space.
Which were in the public notice.
Correct.
Yeah, we can't add anything that's not in the public notice.
So right now I'll just leave it as is and I can amend it if I feel
After discussion?
correct.
Okay, discussion. A motion by Mr. Arnold, motion by Mr. Lawrence, second by Mr. Stonebarger. Discussion.
I guess, if you're talking about taking away that 2 foot of green space, to put it on the west side of the property, I'd actually prefer to see that green space stay on the landscaping side, the street side. I like the aesthetic better in that situation than just adding, 2 feet of green space on the west side.
One thing that I have to make note in the public, and I didn't, is did you all get the letter from the adjacent landowner? Make sure, I would just want to make that noted that there was opposition to the west by the landowner. Who was, it was the Morris Family Trust, represented by, didn't say, did it? Kathleen Morrison.
Luke brought up one other question when he came to the mic. Was it ever, were the adjacent landowners ever approached about buying a few feet on their side? You never answered that part of it.
No, we did not. We did not approach them. Yeah, I'm just gonna say we didn't approach them.
Okay.
Any other discussion? With the Plan Commission, you need 5 votes to pass regardless of the number that are present, just so everyone knows. The motion is to approve the plan as presented to us with a 5-foot variance on the west side and landscape variance in regard to the boulevard.
I'm not a huge fan of this proposal, but at the same point, I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's something that once we have some sticks on the ground out there that we could see some development come in. Right away, I don't like making adjustments for the first one, obviously, but at the same point, I can see what there's the possibilities that this site will bring to that area. I guess I'm kind of pondering between making this adjustment for the greater good of the area.
Being out in the public, I hear a lot of complaints about us not being more proactive to try to get stuff in here. So everybody's had the same opportunity to get something going out in that development. It's just been laying there for a long, long time. So, if the first one, it's trial and error, you're going to have to make some adjustments on that first one and go from there.
Any other discussion?
Well, I agree with you, Mike. I have the same feelings I think you feel. I wish we didn't have to on the very first one. I wish there was some way that we could negotiate here and make it work without having to make that exception. But we also spent probably an hour talking about getting some kind of a master plan and for this whole large portion put together. So I would just say I would sure hope that somebody people would get together, and whether or not they follow through and actually begin to market property into that, but at least get their thoughts together, and so we know where we're headed with it. Then I hope it's in your lifetime, Rod.
I agree with you, Dennis.
I bet you wish you hadn't made that statement 2 hours ago.
I agree with you, Dennis. I think we need to do something out there and get it going. I just really, really struggle with
Yeah.
making a variance in that Gateway Protection District right out of the chute, especially with the opposition by the adjacent landowners around them. But any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll
Well-
ask. Go ahead.
Maybe everybody knows how they're gonna vote, but would you mind coming back up to the mic again? If this goes down today, what's gonna happen? Are you dead in the water? I mean, and don't say the political answer that, you know what I'm saying. Just,
I'll be frank with you guys. I mean, Sherwin-Williams is not an easy tenant to work with. My clients aren't an easy, customer to work with. They've picked Watertown, they want to be here. There's other sites that they could be considering right now. They've put all their focus here. I think if there's not a full, if as we've applied for it, if it's not granted, if it's flat out rejected, it's gonna be challenging to proceed. It's gonna be challenging for them to serve their customers the way they like to serve their customers. And I know we all, we're all in business in some way, shape, or form, and I know we all, kind of have to make certain accommodations to our customers. So we all kind of understand what our customers expect. Well, they know what theirs expect, and that's why they've developed standards that way. So a flat-out rejection, it's going to be difficult. Some sort of, if we got a couple feet here and a few feet here, kind of an answer, I think I can sell that.
okay, what do you think you could sell to help us here? I mean,
I
I think every one of us wants this to pass, but we also are somewhat, very concerned about precedents. So help us. What do you think you could sell?
I think getting rid of that 2-foot landscape on the east side and sliding the curb all the way over and sliding the whole site over 2 foot that way helps. If I got the 3 foot on the west side, that would be ideal. If you gave me 2 foot on the west side and I told Sherwin-Williams they had to knock a foot off their parking stalls, that was the compromise. I think I could sell that. You're asking for, you're asking a question, and it's a fair question.
Well, I think, and the reason I'm asking is we're not at opposites. I just want to make that clear. We're here to see the town grow, and we want to see development happen, but we also have rules and things we have to follow, and we need to pull it together. And
I actually,
you have to have 5 votes to pass on this, and
I actually, every city's got their zoning ordinances and the way they've come together and the way they've evolved. In a C3 zoning district, a 20-foot side yard setback is pretty big. you're looking in this area for, lifestyle center type, type tenants and type, buildings. And, those are more dense than other types of retail uses. So the 20-foot setback right away I kind of admitted earlier that one kind of caught us off guard. We made more of a general assumption when we first started doing due diligence on this site, and
On the west side, what's on the side of that building? Air conditioners?
no, everything's.
Door?
there's nothing
No
on that.
door, nothing? Absolutely
No door,
nothing on
it's
that west side of that
just-
building? Nothing but grass?
Just the roof drains.
That scares me.
And what is the minimum that their contractor required parking spots are?
Their standard is a 9 by 22 parking stall.
22, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I've got a copy of their standards here, and I could throw them up on the screen for you if you'd like. But it's, like you said, we're kind of getting pretty deep into the afternoon here, and
What if we required some trees on that side?
I'd love to put trees in. If that's the compromise, how many do you want?
I,
And maybe I'll throw it out. You might be aware that Sioux Falls just went through a whole zoning ordinance, their whole shape places zoning ordinance, and landscape buffers in exchange for side yard or setback reductions is one of the acceptable methods. If you're looking for what other communities are doing, that's what Sioux Falls is doing. So tell me to put a 2-foot berm along that side to take care of any possible runoff. Tell me to put a few trees over there.
I guess I'd like to see some trees over there if you're gonna be, closer to you're gonna impede into the right of way or the setbacks from the neighbors, and you're gonna have just the side of your building there, nothing, we don't have control, and we have no idea what they're going to be putting there, whether it be a road, whether it be a backside of a restaurant, whether it be, just a bookstore, something that might have windows towards that direction. I think, you're moving in closer. I agree with you. Maybe some sort of a green requirement exchange, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how often to put a tree. I mean, I'm not an expert in that at all.
Trees at 25-foot centers is a pretty decent standard.
How do you guys feel about adding trees, or what are you guys thinking over there?
Pat's got an idea.
No, I saw that, a berm on that side is nice. That way there's a little bit of a safeguard to make sure that water doesn't, and I know you put rain gutters on that sides and downspouts, but when you're getting an inch an hour, or you're getting a 35-mile-an-hour east wind, guess where all that snow's blowing? It's under routine rainfall and snowfall, everything works, but when you shrink it down, all of a sudden that water's running off that roof and it's hitting someone else's property, and we don't know what's going to be over there. So I like the idea of a berm, and I like the idea of trees, but how big are trees, how far apart, and what purpose is it providing? We still broke on our variance. He's asking for a 5-foot variance on the west side, but you think you can get by with 3 foot? A
2-foot berm and trees, 25-foot on center, I would think would be a good compromise.
And
we're talking, you'd want to probably tell me they've got to be minimum 1.3" caliber trees, and they've got to be planted according to.
And from Ken's standpoint,
standards.
historically, when we've asked for trees is buffers, we've said how big they have to be,
Yeah, our landscape ordinance qualifies what they're supposed to be.
so we don't have to.
Size, we don't have to reinvent that, it's all in there.
So you could do that, and then we could let him keep that,
I'd like to see that 2-foot, like Blake said.
yeah, well, I would too, that's on the street side.
Yeah.
For the beauty of the whole road coming in, I'd like to see you keep
The 2
that.
foot's on the private property side.
No, the 2-foot, we're talking between the back of curb on the.
On the back of the
on
curb.
driveway
Yeah.
to the beginning of,
Sidewalk?
Yeah,
back
what
2
he's
foot.
saying is we're not gonna make any concessions on the east
So
side
leave it
with the
15.
landscaping.
So I guess I would amend my
Yes.
motion to include a berm and trees to the specifications, 25-foot centers. I mean, is that, or
Per ordinance.
per the landscaping ordinance
And-
on that west side,
And modify the variance to 3 feet from 5.
and moderate. Okay, because where are we getting the other 3 feet?
He said he can find it.
You can find the 3 feet, okay. And
He can
moderate-
find the other 2 feet.
Other 2, okay.
He's finding 2 feet.
And then the modification of the variance from 5 feet to 3 feet.
I have
I'll
a-
second that.
I have adjusted motion by Mr. Lawrence, second by Mr. Stonebarger.
Just a second, before you put it on.
But the way the ordinance is written, we're not doing anything on that.
They don't wanna do anything here, what you gotta do is you gotta find your 2 feet out of your 22 there.
We're still granting a variance on that side, the way the site plan is written,
Correct.
drawn.
Correct.
We're still gonna grant the 13.3
So
trees.
it's as written, you're just reducing 5 to
Yep.
3, adding berm, which I'd like to have you specify the height of the berm at 2 foot,
2 foot, okay.
trees in ordinance, and, yeah, reduction from 5 to 3,
And you gotta find her here someplace.
yeah, and I'll have to find it.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I must apologize to item number 3, Christina Waldsner. If I would have known, I would have moved you further ahead. Sometimes it's good to be last, sometimes it's not. Is she here? Never mind. Item number 3, applicant Christina Waldsner, Glacial Lakes Academy. Permit number 15927 is seeking a conditional use permit to operate a daycare in a C3 highway commercial zone.
All right. let's see. Jill, come get this, write those notes on there and pass it.
We used to get chicken, but I think it.
It's gonna be much now.
Trees and the difference in the. All right, this is application for 15926, conditional use requests. Again, applicant is Christina Walzer, DBA Glacial Lakes Academy. Property owner is Redland Rental LLC. Applicant seeks conditional use to operate a non-residential daycare facility in the C3 Highway Commercial District per 21.2803, contingent upon compliance with the specific rules governing individual conditional uses and all other applicable regulations. Daycare facility, non-residential, a state licensed non-residential facility at which no one resides, used for the providing a child or adult daycare, and which is limited by the square footage of usable space available. Facility must comply with current state regulations. Applicant seeks again approval for the daycare, blah, blah, blah. Daycare facility is listed in the conditional use. Offered street parking requirements. According to the applicant's submitted site plan, the property has 2 ingress and egress access points. The minimum number of legal size and paved off-street parking spaces required for the facility is 29. 30 possible are shown to exist on this property. Their letter identifies that they currently have 21 spaces available that are paved, and some of those are questionable even. We'll get into that a little bit. Landscape and lighting standards, there is sufficient buildable boulevard area adjacent to this property to comply with the standard boulevard infrastructure requirements. State licensing, architectural engineering code review, and other conditions the Board of Adjustment deems necessary. Well, no, that's not deems necessary. State licensing, architectural engineering code review is required for them to get their permit regardless. So basically what this is, the group over there that's had tons of fun, they want to move and they're preparing to move over to the, and I'll back this out a little way so you can see exactly where we're at. You have Hometown here, and you got the grain elevator here, and of course, Stone's Oil there, and the stockyard right there. They have an access point right here with paved parking here. They have an access point right here with paved parking here. They're wanting to, again, get a state approved, so this whole facility will be monitored, examined by the state prior to licensing being issued, so they're the fallback on this. Because they're required to have an outside play area and some other issues there with them. The daycare building, because it is daycare, will require a code review, and because it's each room that has children has to have a door to the exterior and all that stuff. So all the safety hazards, all the state requirements will be covered. We're basically today just looking at you guys to say that, yep, this piece of dirt is good enough for that daycare to be there.
So can the public notice and the notice to all adjacent landowners has been served, the green cards
Yep.
from all?
We did not get any.
With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the conditional use.
And we didn't get any responses to them whatsoever,
Okay.
pro or against.
Quick question I have. Oh, yep. You can go ahead and come up to the microphone, state your name for the record.
That's on. Oh, it's already on, you're good.
Okay, Andy Hansen, I'm representing the Watertown Co-op, which is their neighbors to the east, and the BN Drive that runs right down through there, it runs continually with heavy truck traffic in and out of the elevator. And you can tell by the size of that, it's a pretty good-sized facility that has a lot of trucks, and the trucks today are double length, a big share of them, so they're pulling trailers with them. And this facility has access right at the angle there in the driveway. That's how they access right there.
And there's another one right there
And
also.
there, that's to the backside, which doesn't affect us. It's here out on the front that, and these trucks go both ways, and they're come in and out continually. So I guess it's up to however you, but it's kind of a tough area, heavy commercial, so.
Thank you.
Is there a time frame when they would have to have the playground equipment or the, you know, we've been through this on some other projects, so is there a time frame that they would have to have that up to speed after they moved in, or do they have to have it done prior to that?
That's state regulation. They're gonna have to satisfy the state prior, before they'll open them or give them occupancy, or however.
Because we passed some of
however
this,
you wanna determine it.
we passed some of this stuff and nothing ever gets done after we pass it, that's why I'm asking.
Okay, so when this is brought before us, what is the main reason? What are we supposed to be looking for on something like this? I'm pretty new to the board, so I kind of
Just to see if it's reasonable use of the land, you know, and the funny thing with daycare facilities, we've got home occupation that are daycare facilities. We do have a couple commercial daycare facilities, one being Jack and Jill uptown. I think they're still there. There was one out in the industrial park, and it's kind of a different, it's not a
One across from Mountain Range.
yeah, it's not really privately owned in your home. It's more of like a commercial daycare.
It's a commercial business, yeah.
You know, kind of a different hybrid.
Yeah.
We try to fit it all, but go ahead, Luke.
Luke, just a question, we'd had a meeting last week about being by, you know, fertilizer plants and stuff like that. Would this have any bearing on what we had visited about, like out by the railroad tracks out there? Because we talked about this site in Watertown here.
Well, we haven't talked a lot about from the land use plan standpoint of redevelopment of certain areas. Fact of the matter is, this property is zoned highway commercial, right?
Correct, C3, yep.
Properties are at this point zoned highway commercial. And this is gonna go back to more towards Mike's question, or Commissioner Lawrence's question is what exactly are we doing with a conditional use permit? And a conditional use, to give you the short version, is that it's a use that is allowable. It is compatible with surrounding land uses because of the fact that it is listed in the ordinance. It's an administrative function of the board, generally speaking, when you wind up seeing it. So what you're looking at is, does it meet the conditions of our zoning district of what we have? So at that point, it's a listed use in there. So now all what you're looking at is are there things that we need to do to improve this area to make it fit in with the rest of the district?
So my job isn't to come up here and say, well, that's not safe, it's next to a co-op elevator, those kids are in danger because of the road that's out in front of it, or you know, there's a breathing in manure from across the street. I mean, that's not part of why I'm here, and that's what I'm trying to, is this a land use thing? Is this dirt good enough, or is that something that I need to take into account?
The question you'd be taking into account is it inappropriate for a commercial use such as this to be located, like you said, within that area? Generally speaking, though, and this does vary from community to community as to how they interpret it, but for the most part, generally those compatibility questions are largely on what types of conditions, what standard do I have to meet in order to be approved? And yeah, generally, certainly you could look at it and say, you know, what those things are that make this just not a site for that, but you do have to keep in mind this is zoned highway commercial. If the idea is that it should have an industrial use next to it, then it should probably be zoned industrial instead.
I think from a safety standpoint, having it licensed by the state gives us a lot more safe area than if we just license daycare in the residential area.
And
Because they have to meet state standards.
And it's a tough one because you actually look there and go, you know, we just worked for 2 hours on the other side of town on a major highway. Here we're on the other side of town where we have 2 major highways crossing. I think if we did it the other way around and said, if someone came into us and said, I want to put a stockyard on Highway 20, we'd say that's probably not the right place to put it. Or I want to put an elevator on Highway 20, we'd say that's probably not the best spot. I want to put a daycare, well, it's a reasonable spot. But you know what happens is, again, we're put in a position because we've outgrown, this used to be outside of town and now it's not, and it's just kind of the dynamics as the city grows. You look and go, is it the right place? It's probably more of the right place for this than it is a fertilizer plant or a elevator or a, you know, and you look and go, what about what they're breathing? What about the restaurant kitty corner from them? Or the car dealerships? You know, and it is an area where we just had a bypass that meets in there that we foresee in the long distance future that this is someday that elevator may not be there, someday that stockyard might not be there, and it would be a more commercial rather than industrial corner. Just a thought. But is it the correct use of the land as the way the land is currently zoned in C3? That's what the conditional use is for, correct?
Mr. Chairman?
They had Burkhart Radio there. There was a steak and buffet there,
Sally's
Popeye's bar or whatever. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman? Just as a reminder to the board, you have a piece of paper in your packet that is the 210202B. And as with any conditional use, that is the South Dakota Supreme Court's direction to you on a list of things that you routinely look at. Ingress and egress to the property, off-street parking, general compatibility, required side yards, screening and buffering, and that's your general list. And then the safety, of course, of the children loading and unloading and things like that.
Thank you. And the one thing is, the state's guidelines are more stringent than what our guidelines are. And that, like John said, that's our safety net that's underneath us in any of our daycare
But they're
decisions.
They're not attacking the zoning issue as to whether it's there. That's why we're saying.
Right.
Is the ground okay?
Right,
If
right.
the ground's good, then they're gonna, though you don't have to worry about any of the rest of that, because that's gonna fall back into their basket.
Okay.
To make sure it's meeting all
And
the
they
other
have to be
provisions.
state certified, is that correct?
Pardon?
They have
Yes,
to be
yes.
state.
And that's because of the number of kids they have in-house.
Just because it's commercial daycare.
Okay,
period.
commercial daycare. Okay, anything else in the public? Anyone want to speak on the public hearing? With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for further discussion.
I make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Stonebarger,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Dolly. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Assume there's no old business, new business, executive session. I'll ask for a motion. Oh, I take it back. I forgot to get a motion in a second to approve the minutes of January 22nd, 2015.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Lawrence.
Second.
Second by Mr. Arnold. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I need a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Lawrence. Second by Mr. Dolly. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
I say winner, winner, chicken dinner, but I don't know, they've been out in the open for 2 hours.